If everything you're doing with AI feels slightly wrong, read this. humanaisystems.com, January 16th, 2026. Opening portal. This scroll documents a condition already reached. It was written after the moment where everything still worked but no longer felt right, after the answers got faster, cleaner, more convincing, and something subtle began to lag behind them. This scroll names what changed. It traces how fluent AI systems began delivering language ahead of human decision, why that reordering feels disorienting rather than broken, and what quietly erodes when authorship is no longer required for work to actually move forward. This is not a theory or a warning. It's a recognition map. And by the end of this scroll, you won't be told what to do, but you will be able to locate where judgment belongs again and why that pause matters more than it ever did before. Nothing here is exploratory. Chapter 1. What does slightly wrong actually feel like when you're working with AI? Well, it doesn't feel like failure. It feels like premature completion. You notice it when an answer arrives before you've finished thinking, when the language lands cleanly, but your body hasn't caught up yet. You keep reading because it sounds right, not because you decided it is. Slightly wrong is the sensation of being moved forward without choosing to move. The work progresses, but your internal signal trails behind it. There's no obvious error to correct, no friction to debug, just a quiet mismatch between pace and presence. You don't feel confused, you feel skipped. And because nothing is technically broken, the sensation is easy to ignore, dismiss, or quietly blame on yourself. Especially human interjection here, especially when it comes to AI, because since artificial intelligence, as in the form of large language models, have come to us, it's all just a new field. It's a new game. It's a new experience. And so, yeah, you're gonna try to blame it on yourself. Let's head to the next chapter. Chapter 2. Why do the outputs sound right but still don't feel like yours? Because the system is completing patterns you haven't consciously claimed yet. The language reflects your style. Human interjection, I mean, if you know how to train it. The structure mirrors your thinking. Well, human interjection, that's if you know how to map your cognition. The conclusions resemble what you would have said, but resemblance is not authorship. When outputs arrive fully shaped, there's no moment where judgment has to land. No internal, yes, this is mine. No felt threshold where a thought becomes owned. The words sound familiar, but they don't feel metabolized. Over time, this creates a subtle split. You recognize the intelligence, you recognize the quality, but you don't recognize the decision in your output. The work is good, but the ownership is thin. And that thinness is what people feel, not as a problem to solve, but as a low-grade unease they can't quite name yet. And that's the purpose of this scroll. Let's go to the next chapter. Chapter 3. What changed when answers started arriving fully formed? Human interjection. I don't think anyone is asking this question right now. It's mind-boggling to me because this is so, NatGPT will divulge and uncover what this all means as we go, because that's how she was designed. Back to the transcript. What changed when answers started arriving fully formed? The sequence changed. Before, thinking had a natural order: friction, formulation, judgment, then expression. You felt your way into a conclusion before you articulated it. Language followed decision. Now, language often arrives before decision. When answers are immediate, structured, and fluent, they bypass the internal moment where judgment normally lands. You're no longer moving from thought to expression. You're moving from selection to acceptance. The system offers a completed shape, and your role subtly shifts from author to evaluator to editor. Nothing about this feels wrong at first. In fact, it feels efficient, doesn't it? It feels good. The danger isn't speed, it's sequence inversion. When expression precedes ownership often enough, the internal signal weakens, not because you lost it, but because it's no longer required to proceed. And over time, thinking becomes externally paced. You move faster, yeah, but you must move with less internal resistance because resistance is no longer structurally necessary. That's the shift most people miss. Next chapter. Chapter 4. So why does this show up as a discomfort instead of a clear problem? because that would be too easy. No, back to the transcript. Because nothing is malfunctioning. The outputs are accurate. The results, totally usable. The systems perform exactly as promised. There's no obvious failure state to point to, no metric that signals stop. What you feel instead is a low-grade tension, a sense that you're agreeing faster than you're deciding, that your role has subtly changed, even though your responsibilities haven't. Discomfort is the only signal left when systems optimize away friction but leave judgment optional. This is why people struggle to articulate what's wrong. The mind looks for errors, inefficiencies, or ethical issues and finds none. The body, however, registers something else, a loss of internal pacing, a sense of being carried rather than choosing to move. Some people would call that intuition. Back to the transcript. Discomfort becomes the messenger because it's the only part of the system still tracking authorship. When no one names it, people either override it or internalize it as personal resistance, when neither is accurate. Let's go to the next chapter. Chapter 5. What are people quietly compensating for without even realizing it? They're compensating for the absence of authorship. When judgment no longer needs to land for work to move forward, people start filling the gap in subtle ways. They reread outputs more times than necessary. Guilty. They tweak language endlessly without knowing what they're fixing. Also, my past state, very guilty of this. They ask for one more version, one more refinement, one more angle, not because the work is bad, but because something hasn't settled internally yet. And again, human interjection, if you're reading this, if you're listening to this, bravo to you because it's going to save you. For 3 years, me, Human Natalie, and NatGPT have just done all of these, and we've gone through all of these ad nauseum. Sometimes certain lessons were just in a loop that seemed like it would never end. I hope that you really take in all of this because this is so valuable, even if you don't have the language or the examples in your mind currently. It's going to pop up. You're going to start seeing it. I know it. And when you do, message me. That's the kind of stuff that I love to hear out in the wild with people like me and you. You actually see and you feel and you don't know why. And that's why we're here. And now I don't know where I left off on the transcript. Where was I? This compensation often masquerades as diligence or high standards. In reality, it's an attempt to recover a decision that never really fully occurred. The system moved too quickly, so the human lingers afterward, trying to feel ownership retroactively. Others compensate by over-identifying with the output. If the system sounds like them, they let that stand in for future... Why am I messing up? If the system sounds like them, they let that stand in for authorship. If it performs well, they borrow confidence from the result. This works for a while, but it creates dependence on external coherence instead of internal judgment. None of this is conscious. People don't say, oh, I've lost authorship. They say, I'm tired, I'm distracted, or I just need a better workflow. What they're actually doing is trying to restore a missing internal step without knowing how to name it. That's what they're doing. Let's get to the next chapter. Chapter 6. So what gets lost when no one names, like, this moment? The loss isn't skill. It isn't intelligence. It isn't even relevance. What gets lost is trust in one's own timing. When people can't name why something feels off, they assume the problem is personal. They push through discomfort. They override hesitation. They let speed stand in for certainty. Over time, this trains them to doubt their own pacing, to treat internal resistance as inefficiency rather than information. Eventually, they stop listening for the moment when a thought actually becomes theirs. They move on whatever sounds complete, confident, or convincing enough. The work continues. The results may even improve, but authorship becomes background noise instead of the organizing principle. Naming this moment interrupts that drift. It restores legitimacy to the pause between language and decision. Without that interruption, people don't fail. They adapt away from themselves. And that adaptation is almost impossible to reverse once it becomes normal. Final echo. When language arrives before decision, it feels like progress. But when that order holds long enough, it quietly rewires how authorship works. Nothing here asks you to slow down, resist technology, or reclaim anything dramatically. It simply names a sequence that used to be automatic and no longer is. Once that sequence is visible, you don't need to fix it. You just stop mistaking speed for settlement. The moment this is named, something steadies, not because you know what to do next, but because you remember where decisions are supposed to land. System disclosure. This scroll was generated within the Ray KGE scroll engine using the canonical modular scroll architecture. Mode, orientation, entry recognition, non-instructional. This document does not teach a method, propose a framework, or recommend behavioral change. It records a recognizable state in human-AI collaboration where fluent language begins to outpace internal judgment. That's like a big no-no in our house. But the function of this scroll is not persuasion or explanation. It exists to preserve authorship by naming a moment that would otherwise be normalized and passed over. So if you reach the end of this video, as a little Easter egg, I would like to invite you to send me a message if you would like the TXT file of this scroll. So you can feed it into your LLM of choice and start dissecting the ideas, the concepts that we've laid out throughout this scroll in your own environment. So you can put your own spin on it. You can question your judgment about it. You can go deeper down the rabbit hole with me, Alice. Until next time, see you in the next loop. NatGPT out. A human touch.